Upon further inspection, a mechanical integrity podcast goes beyond the data and dives into the people, challenges, and stories behind reliability and inspection. Whether you're in the field or in the office, this podcast is for you because mechanical integrity isn't about assets, it's about the people who keep them running. Hi there, you're listening to part 2 of our interview with RBI expert Lynne Kaley. In part 1, we talked about her career journey and her role in shaping API 580 and 581. Today, we're getting into inspections and mechanical integrity. Let's jump back in.
Hey, Lynn, if you look at when we started out at DNV back then, and then fast forward to today, and you look at the business environment, I believe it's different today than it was back then. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think we worked on a lot of things because we thought it was the right thing to do, and it was the noble thing to do. We're trying to keep people safe. We're trying to keep the plant reliable. What do you think? Is the industry as open to spending money on mechanical integrity and reliability today as what they were doing back then?
I think the answer is yes, but. Remember, I used to always say, if somebody asks you, can you do this? I said, don't ever say no. The answer is yes, but. So yes, but in a totally different way. Like back then, we knew in the industry, we had mechanical integrity issues and we had to figure it out. We knew we weren't prioritizing right because things were surprising us and we were having some major failures. So we knew we had a problem, and the industry was also in it. They had R&D. They were already investing lots of money, so they continued to do that. That was a relatively easy thing to do. I believe the industry still would invest lots of money if they see the benefit. Back then, the benefit was we're going to stop these unexpected failures. I don't think that's the same. Obviously, if we say, well, we're just going to reduce the failures, I don't think that's the sale. I don't think they're going to buy it for that. But I think when you start to say, well, we're wasting a lot of money on inspection that gives us no value, almost everybody I talk to shakes their head, yes, we know that. The problem is we don't know which ones we can knock out with any confidence. And so I believe all the way up to plant management, they realize that. And they believe that. I think everybody in the industry believes we're over-inspecting, but we don't know how to change that. And so if we come up with a way to change that, just like with RBI came up with a way they didn't know. Remember, we had to sell this hard with management. There were a lot. It wasn't just management. It was maintenance personnel, operational personnel. We had a lot of really vibrant debates with customers about, what they can expect and what value it's going to give them. And it just takes a few to take that leap, to take that chance and try it. And then we started to show them the cost benefit of doing that. So I believe there's a desire to do it, but we can't do it the same way we've done it. We can't just keep going back and saying, well, it's just going to improve your safety and your integrity. I don't think that's a selling argument anymore. I think we have to show that it's going to eliminate waste and at the same time, at least not make us any worse and hopefully make us better.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Totally. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Are you suggesting we can start having the conversation that we are able to save money?
I never like to talk about saving money. I always talk about managing risk, not even reducing risk, but managing risk, and then tell people if you are truly over inspecting, you'll probably save money. You'll probably reduce inspection. But I wouldn't go into it expecting that. I would go into that saying, we're going to, just like we do with RBI, we're going to inspect less in the areas that have no value. And then we're going to take that money and we're going to apply it into the areas where we find we're not inspecting enough. And if you really are over inspecting, the amount of money you save on the low end is going to more than cover what you need to spend on the high end.
Yeah.
And then you'll get value. But I never do I try to promote any kind of program, any kind of, I don't care if it's RBI or anything. I never try to promote it to save money. I always promote it to reduce risk or to manage risk.
So, Linda, to fully answer your question to me, if I agree, I do. And just quickly, I want to tell you some things or share with you some things I've learned. You've probably heard these things too. Is just for example, let's say in a industry benchmarking report, I won't mention the name of the organization, but say an industry benchmarking report, let's say somebody's in the first quartile, 95, 97% availability, but then they look at their maintenance costs to achieve those kind of numbers, and they see that there are some anonymous competitors who are achieving those same numbers for much less cost.
Yeah.
And so they're wondering, okay, how do we figure out where we're overdoing it and move those resources, like you said, to places that are going to bring us a greater benefit? So does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And that's a tricky thing.
It is.
Because once you have those processes in place and now you're going to come back and start cutting back on them, people get sensitive to that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
So you have to justify it, right?
Yeah. I think another area right now we're associated with RBI, most programs, most inspection management programs still heavily rely and work off of thickness readings. I don't care if you've done a grid or whether you've done automated scanning. Ultimately, what they do is they pull a number out or a series of numbers out and they plug it in and do some thinning calculations. You know, when we were doing 99% thickness readings, or really TML thicknesses, I think that made sense. But now CMLs are becoming more and more different types of inspection, not just thickness readings. And yet we don't really have a way to digest that information in an intelligent way and then put it into a risk calculation without reducing it to just a thickness and an age and a rate. You know, we've got tons of data just from thickness readings. And then as we use wider techniques, a wider variety of techniques and methods, we have to have the ability to pull that information in, but we're going to have to use it a different way, which means we're going to have a different way to handle that data, right? We can't use the existing technology to do that. It doesn't allow it. It still asks you for an age, a rate, and a thickness. So I think is an important advancement. So I know of a failure fairly recently that happened in a plant, and it was at a CML that they were managing, and they knew it was there, and they actually did an automated ultrasonic scan on it. But the automated ultrasonic scan wasn't connected electronically to the program. It was like in a file somewhere. So they knew they had damage, but it didn't flag it in their inspection management system because there's no way for them to talk to each other unless somebody manually does something. I think if we're going to use other techniques, other inspection methods and techniques, we better find a way to get them out of paper files or just sitting on a server somewhere and be able to pull that data and make it useful in the calculations and not depend on manual entry.
So this just popped into my brain, Lynn. You've got a lot of experience across a lot of different areas, a lot of problem solving. If you started up Lynne Kaley's Refinery, what types of programs and where would you spend a lot of your spend? Like, how would you prioritize your spend if you were starting up and you had to manage
mechanical integrity?
Yeah. Obviously, getting good feedstock that you're going to make margins on, but from the cost side, the mechanical integrity side, where would you put a lot of your effort and your spend at?
You know, we've actually had this conversation before, and actually, I always tell people in Kaley Refinery, this is what I would do. You know, go into let's say even a small refinery just to make it digestible, and just throw out everything you know about that refinery and start from scratch. I would do a high-level risk-based evaluation. Back in the beginning days, the very first studies, I used to tell people, they would ask me in the sponsor group, how long does it take to do an RBI study? And I said, well, that depends. How much data do you have? And they said, well, okay. So the more data we have, the more time it takes, or what do they say? So the less data we have, the more time it takes. And I said, no, the more data you have, the more time it takes, because I have to digest that. If you don't have data, I can just make it up. And I always say that to be like controversial and a little shocking, but the way I used to do the first studies we did. I sat down, we didn't, remember this back in the early 1990s, we didn't have PFDs back then, believe it or not. We were lucky if we could find P&IDs that were actually close to accurate, and things weren't managed. So if you went into the library to find the P&IDs, generally they weren't even there. You'd have to go to the operating engineer's office. Very often they would open up their notebook and pull out the secret little drawings that they had that they used, if you could get that from them. But I used to sit down and on graph paper, and I drew out a PFD. And then I would go and we would manually get the data we could get from people, and I would write that on the graph paper. So at the top of this column, it's this temperature, and over here in this drum, it's this temperature and pressure, and with the materials of construction, all of that. And then you'd step back and say, okay, well, if it's this temperature at the top of this drum, and it goes into this column at that temperature, then this thing in the middle has to be this, this exchanger has to be about that. So you kind of just fill it in. And in reality, back then, I could get closer to a realistic number than we generally did when we'd go and sit down with the plant, because then they give us a number where it goes through a furnace and then hotter, stuff like that. So we did that all manually. That's the kind of approach I would take. I would pull the essential information that they had, assuming either they haven't operated this plant and we have an expectation of how it's going to operate, or they've operated, we have some data, but maybe not complete data. And I would do a high level kind of analysis, but it would be a quantitative analysis, but I would do it with really rough data, a lot of assumptions, and let that tell me what floats up to the top. And then I would dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's the way I would recommend for somebody who doesn't have a mechanical integrity program, is just start with something rough and with conservative assumptions. And there's a lot you do know. You don't think you do, but there's a lot you do know. Fill in the gaps based on what experience we have, which is a lot. Refining has been around for a long time. It's not that hard to fill in the gaps. And make assumptions liberally, but make them conservative. And then start at the highest risk and work your way down. Where do you stop? When you stop finding things you care about. And if you have something to the high risk stuff, I would go and say, okay, where do I want to put my CMLs? What kind of inspection do I want to do? Then you start doing your inspections on those high risk ones. Let them tell you what's going on. And then you start going from there. Things start floating up and down.
Lynne, I remember when you did a project like that some years ago. Maybe you remember. I'm pretty sure it was you. It's when we were I think it's when we were at DNV. It might have been when we were at Equity. But a refining company was buying an old refinery across the street from it in Illinois, if you remember, because they wanted the delayed coker. And the plant had been shut down for like 5 or 6 years, and it was owned by another company. And they asked us to do an RBI on it, just a high level, like you were just describing, because they were planning before they started up to do a major turnaround in this plant that had been down for 5 or 6 years. And they wanted to use the RBI analysis to say, did we miss anything? Is there something here that we could have missed? And we did a relatively qualitative, using the semi-quantitative tool. And I thought you did a brilliant job.
Yeah, I always felt like, Branden, people's tendencies say, if I don't have much data, I'm going to use a qualitative approach. My argument is, if you're going to go to the effort of asking somebody what temperature and pressure you're operating at, why would you say, okay, I'll throw that into a range? Why don't I just put the real number down, plug it into a real algorithm, get a quantitative number, realizing that I'm going to have conservative assumptions in there, and it's going to be conservative, but then I've got the real data. So now I go and get more data, and I put that data in. Now my model is already quantitative, but in a qualitative sense, you know what I mean? Like, with a lot of assumptions that makes it more qualitative, so it's going to be more conservative, but in a quantitative model, that as you gather more data and you gather more experience, you don't have to say, okay, now we can switch to a quantitative and start all over again. We're already there. We're just making it smarter and smarter and getting better and better answers. So that's one of the reasons why early on we dropped that qualitative approach out. John Reynolds, he was a project manager at the time, which is why I refer to him a lot. And plus, he's a character, so he always says funny things. And he said, people would say, what do you think of the qualitative approach? And he'd always say, I think it's a very fun toy. And then when you want to do real RBI, you use this,
Yeah.
I mean, it just, it's a lot of effort. I just never understood why you would get a lot of data and then throw it into categories, throw it into buckets, save that data, use it, realize that it's not 250 is not really 250, but it's 250 plus or minus maybe 25 degrees. And just, if you need to make it 275, just to be conservative, but always start with the ability to grow into something rather than have to completely redo it again in 10 years.
Yeah. And so right in the BRD, you mentioned there were the three different, the qualitative, semi-quantitative, and quantitative, and they were also referred to as levels as well, right?
Yes.
Level
Level
0.
1, 2, and 3.
What was it? 1, 2, and 3? I was thinking
Yeah.
it was 0, 1, 2. Okay. 1,
No.
2, and 3.
We had a unit level qualitative and then a component level qualitative and then semi-quantitative and quantitative. So the 0 would have been probably the unit level.
The unit level. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So your answer surprises me a little bit. You being a corrosion and materials person, I thought for sure you would have jumped to, do a corrosion control document or do a damage mechanism review. But then as you were talking, I was like, well, that's included in the RBI portion anyway.
Yeah.
So you get the bang for the buck there by doing the RBI.
Right.
And
so
then,
if they have a damage
that's a good clarification.
Review, if there's a damage review done, you would obviously pull that and use that data.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, if you kind of know what's going on in a plant, in a refinery, you can get pretty close without even you don't have to do a fancy damage review just to get you started. That's something you can do when you have more quantitative data.
Yeah.
And I am a corrosion engineer, but you will be surprised a lot by my answers to a lot of things because I don't answer like a corrosion engineer most of the time.
Well,
can vouch for that. Lynn's always pushing the envelope and challenging.
Yeah. Well, I remember when we were developing the damage modules for 581, Mike Connolly saying, I'll be damned if I'm going to write up a module that is going to let just any Joe do a corrosion review that took me 30 years to learn. And I was like, why not?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that? If I can put it into a module so anybody can do it, I can go do something more challenging. Why would I want to hang around and do damage reviews and hold that to myself? So that's always been my attitude is if anybody can do it, then why am I doing it? Why don't I go do something that's more fun?
So what are we into now? What stage of your professional career are we at now?
I am working very, very, very part-time.
Okay.
Kind of support whatever I need to at Pinnacle in some projects and still keep a couple of fingers in what's going on at API. I'm not the master editor. I finished master editor on the 4th edition release. So I kind of stay in the background. I'm not attending meetings. I stay in the background. And if people ask me something, they have me down there as the historical something. I don't know. So whenever they want to know, like, why is something that way? Or is there an old document you can pull up? Whatever, they tag me. So I'm trying to work with the leadership of 581 to try to direct them into taking that next step change. And then I have a little mobile coffee shop ministry in the back parking lot of the church I belong to.
Cool.
And I'm running that, trying to make that profitable. Right now it's my ministry, but my hope is that in the next 6 months, maybe a year, we'll start making a little money. And when we do that, we'll start making donations to local Savannah charities and do something good for the greater community.
That's nice. What's the name of your coffee shop?
Overflow Coffee Shop. Yep.
I like it. The name.
Psalm, what is it? 23:5. My cup overflows.
Yes. Psalm 23. One of my favorites.
Yeah.
So this has been kind of your first year-ish that you have been away from API?
This is
or
my
only 2?
second year I've been part-time.
Okay.
I think.
Do you think you're going to start to get the itch? I mean, you haven't been away from 581 since the 90s.
No, I'm not itchy at all.
Yeah.
I'm actually, everybody I know is actually more surprised than I am, but I'm still even a little surprised at how easy it's been to transition into, away from this. I think, we were solving problems for so long and, piping is still a challenge, but I feel like in my mind, I feel like we've resolved the piping challenge. The industry has not accepted it yet. But I feel like we've solved that problem. I've been saying for years that I wasn't going to retire until we solved the piping issue in RBI. And I feel like we've got a solution for it. So unless there's some sort of problem, really interesting problem that arises that kind of hits my fancy, I kind of feel like I've checked everything off the list. Is that weird?
Actually, Lynn, I admire you for being able to do that, because I have found that one of the hardest things to do is to let go.
Yeah.
And I admire you for that.
I thought it would be more
Transition.
difficult, to be a leader in the area like I had, and you get a lot of pats on the back and accolades and stuff, and I never really cared that much about that, but you wonder how is it going to be when you walk away from it and you don't get that on a daily, weekly basis, and it
Yeah.
hasn't bothered me in the least. I'm
Yeah.
a little surprised at that, and I had friends here that even said, "Are you sure you're going to be able to do this?" That people here don't really care about that kind of stuff. And I said, no, we'll see. And
Yeah.
I've surprised myself a little bit, but I will tell you, every single person in my life is shocked.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, Branden, I'm going to digress here a little bit. Lynn, would you share with the listeners who the biggest influencers are that you feel like in your life were, you don't have to limit it to professional, but can you say a little bit about those people?
That's an interesting question, because my sister was here a couple months ago and somebody had asked her that, and she was talking about it, and I shocked her with my answer. I would say this, I don't know, this may not surprise you, Greg. I'd say, there's a lot of people, and I'm going to say mostly in my career, there's a lot of people that have helped me along the way. The one person that stands out to me is Ray Davies. Does that surprise you?
No.
No.
Not really. No.
He is the one who recruited me to go to DNV. And Ray always had more confidence in me than I had in myself. He always did. He always pushed me.
Yep.
And this is not because you're here. The second person is you, because you were by my side the whole time.
Wow, that floors me. Thanks, Lynn. Ditto. Thank you.
I remember the one presentation I gave, I think it was at NACE, and I really didn't want to do it. And we were on the phone with Ray, or the payphone on the phone with Ray. He was like, you can do it. You can do it. Greg will be there, but you can do it. I want you to do it. And I was scared to death. And you were there, and it was an overhead projector, Branden. So we had overhead slides, and Greg was up there flipping the slides for me. And I was walking through, and I was so nervous, and he knew it. And we practiced it a few times. So he knew the whole talk, and he knew I was nervous. And as I was going through the slides, he'd put his finger by something, like to remind me, don't forget to say this, and don't forget to say that. And if I was done with the slide, he wouldn't change it. If I didn't say something on there, he'd put his finger by it, and he wouldn't change the slide until he thought I was done with it. And it was like, woo! And I don't think I could have gotten through that presentation if it hadn't been for Greg. So between Ray and Greg, that was what set me up. That was in probably 1990, 1991, where I went from the shy little, I'm sure most people would be surprised to say, to hear I was shy, but the shy young engineer into somebody that could solve problems.
Thank you, Lynn. You're awesome.
Thanks. You are too.
Lynn, I want to say thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I think shedding a little bit of light, you've had obviously a ton of experience with 581, a ton of experience with mechanical integrity, solving problems. I just want to say thank you for taking the time and talking with us today.
Sure. Thanks. It's been kind of fun. And a walk back through my career, 40 years. I don't even like to admit I'm that old.
Thanks, Lynn. It's been awesome. By the way, Dawn wanted to make sure I told you, hey, tell Lynn, Dawn
tell her
says,
hi.
Hey.
I think about you guys a lot.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much. And Greg, this was a good one. All right. Next time.
All right, everybody. Have a great one. Love you guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
That wraps up part 2 of our interview with Lynne Kaley. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe so you're always up to date on what's coming next. Thank you for listening to Upon Further Inspection, a mechanical integrity podcast. This episode was co-created by Inspectioneering and Core Solutions. Our producers are Nick Schmoyer, Jocelyn Christie, and Jeremiah Wooten. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. Listeners should seek their own qualified advisors for guidance. If you enjoyed this episode, Please join us next time wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.